I just read the Tawny Man Trilogy by Robin Hobb, aka Megan Lindholm. I didn't know it was a pseudonym Robin Hobb was. Well, I don't know what she likes to be called by. I'm gonna keep on calling her by Hobb because it sounds nicer in my mouth, so Hobb. And I got thoughts about it. I did see some kind of reviews before I read the series, and I know it's like a lot of people's favorite part or favorite trilogy in the series of the Realm of the Outerling series in general. And so I came in this with a lot of high expectations, I would say. And I think those expectations were definitely met. This is like, I think this trilogy has one of the best scenes, some of the best people. I think it gives a really fresh kind of perspective to the Realm of the Outerlings in general. And you know, since we're already speaking about that, I'm start with just giving a general overview of what I thought about the book. I intended for this to be like entirely spoiler free, so I don't have to think much about the book. And also, it's kind of nice to have things that are spoiler free, right? Okay, so general review. First half of the first book, which I think it's The Fool's Errand, that was extremely slow. Like the first half of the book, literally nothing happens. It's kind of crazy how nothing happens. I think it's slower than anything from the live ship trilogies, anything from the Farseer trilogies. It is the slowest part of any Megan Lindholm / Robin Hobb book. To be honest, for me personally, I did not mind that. And so kind of having that slow burn where we're just listening to like, oh, Fitz is doing some mundane stuff and he's doing it with Night Eyes and like what might he come across in mundane life. I think to me that was still interesting because I like Fitz and I like how Robin Hobb writes her characters and how she kind of develops her characters. But you know, honestly, there are times where I'm just like, y'all, I can't just be here reading about Fitz just, you know, living his life regrets and stuff like that. It's just kind of depressing. So yeah, so I think that's one of the main criticisms of the series in my opinion. But I will say that once that first half is up and you actually start getting into the actual, you know, plot political intrigue of the book, it never really goes back to kind of those slow moments really ever again in the series. Maybe at the end it does a little bit because it's kind of wrapping up, but I think the rest of the series is very much focused on the plot and it feels a lot faster paced than the beginning. So I will say though, kind of talking about the plot, I will say that the plot of the Tawny Man trilogies, for some reason, it did not really resonate with me as much as the live ship trilogies did or the Farseer trilogies for some reason. I think it's actually very similar to how I felt about the Farseer trilogies, but I would say, you know, throughout the series, you don't really know the antagonist. Like the antagonist is not as fleshed out as, you know, like antagonist for the live ship trilogies is extremely thought out, right? And so I just read the live ship trilogies and coming into the Tawny Man trilogies, I was kind of expecting Hobb to have that kind of fleshed out antagonist because one of the main things I didn't like about the Farsight trilogies was how the antagonist did not feel as complex. Having Fitz go into the Buckkeep Castle and getting involved with the political intrigues in a more important way was pretty refreshing and nostalgic at the same time, right? Because you kind of come from the Farsight trilogies where Fitz is a like child, goes to a young adult essentially, and he knows the intricacies of Bucky Castle, but he's not super as involved with it as Shade, right? And seeing him kind of work hand in hand with Shade is extremely fulfilling for some reason, right? And I think speaking on that, it helps us segue into a topic of cycles in the Farseer trilogies. So I think Robin Hobb really dives hard into the topic of themes inside the Tawny Man trilogy, right? And you know, there's cycles involving nature. I'm gonna focus on kind of just the political situation at Buckkeep Castle. I think the Tawny Man trilogy really emphasizes on the fact that Buckkeep Castle is a cycle. And now that I'm thinking about it, it might even be symbolic of, you know, the cycles of nature and stuff like that. But you know, the cycles are very clear inside the book in terms of roles. Where in Bucky Capsules, you have the sense that the roles remain static, but the characters are always changing. You have Shade and Fitz, you have Ketrigan and King Shade, you have Prince Dutiful and Prince Verity. So there are a lot of kind of not recycled, but you can see a lot of similarities between the roles that were occupied in the Farsi trilogies and the Tawny Man trilogies. And kind of speaking on those cycles and those roles in particular, each of those roles occupies a very different space and they have their challenges in very different ways. You know, since we're in Fitz's perspective, you really can see that Fitz is worked to the bone in this book, like he is in every single book, right? But One of the kind of comforting things in the books is that there is a sense of camaraderie between these roles in the sense that they're all really, really tired because they're all trying to make this political situation work and to keep Buckkeep running. And eventually you get the sense that the cycle of Buckkeep in these roles becomes and especially in the light of, the Fool's Prophecies, maintaining of the cycle of Buckkeep kind of symbolizes the prosperity of the six judges in general. One of the things that I really liked about the Tawny Man trilogies, and I think it's one of the main selling points of the Tawny Man trilogy, is the interaction between Fitz and the Fool. The bond these two have for each other are extremely unique, extremely curated, and I think it's kind of strange that I didn't really pick up on those feelings or those connections before in the Farseer trilogies. They were definitely there, but I think this book really solidifies the fact that these two guys are, they're essentially star-crossed lovers, right? And throughout the book, they act a little bit like lovers, but very toxic lovers, right? They get into arguments that last for months where they're just, it's very funny because they're sharing a room and they just avoid each other. And because of their positions and, especially Fitz's position, they avoid each other in such a weird, sneaky manner. It's very similar to like if you don't like your roommate, you kind of time out ways to avoid your roommate. And also the same way as lovers, where you don't talk to each other because if you do, things are gonna radically change. You're gonna explode, right? But that type of like situationship they have really explores kind of the multitudes of bonds they have, right? They have platonic bonds, some romantic bonds, to be honest, right? Some magical bonds, some prophetic bonds. They're connected to each other in such strong ways. It's really hard to define their relationship, which is probably why I didn't really pick up on it in the last book because it was so complex. I just turned my brain off, to be honest. But because of the strength of their bonds, when they do fight, it is one of the most heartbreaking things, to be honest, because you really feel like when they are separated, they really lose aspects of each other. Like it's like losing your soulmate in a sense, right? They are together by fate, and when they kind of get angry at each other and fight and they're not together, it feels really sad and it feels like each person is missing something from their lives. It's definitely like just seeing their relationships and how they interact is honestly a lot of emotional roller coasters on top of like different emotional roller coasters. But talking about relationships in this book, one of the primary relationships explored in the Tawny Man trilogy is the relationship of Fitz to himself. Fitz is a lot of different things. He's like witted, he's part of the Farseer bloodline, which means he has the ability to skill. He was a wolf at one time. He has a bunch of different things, and each of those traits makes him a target to kill, which, so I think this book does a lot in trying to explore how a person finds their place in the world, especially when they feel like they've never really fit in before in any kind of place. I think throughout this trilogy, Fitz always has this uncertainty about the future because he doesn't really know what his place is, right? He does so much things in Buckkeep, but Fitz is juggling with different identities and different ways to kind of deal with his pain, deal with his trauma. You can definitely feel that uncertainty start to eat at him throughout the books, right? Because as he does more things for Buckkeep, he begins to wonder, like, what does his future actually look like, right? I think the way Robin Hobb kind of deals with these developments into, Fitz's personality and how he's trying to kind of bring himself back together and fix himself is really interesting. And I feel like it's very applicable to a lot of different people. I really love this series. I think it really matched the expectations I had for it. I definitely think it contains some of Hobb's best work. The characters are, of course, amazing, and the emotional manipulation is, of course, masterful. It's Robin Hobb, after all, aka Megan Lindholm. I can't wait to read the next series in the trilogy. I always see a little bit of reviews before I read the next series. Apparently the next series is considered her worst series in the books. I'm not sure. I don't remember if it was worse in the sense like it's bad compared to her other books, which means it's still gonna be good, or if it's just like not, like it's just like gonna be flat, but I'm still excited to read it just because I love her writing, and I do think that, the next book is the Rainbow Chronicles, and I think it's gonna be interesting to see. It looks like it's gonna really continue developing the world that Robin Hobb has made. And honestly, even if it's not as good as the other books, I'm pretty excited to still read it. I love Robin Hobb's work and I will read anything she writes. All right, bye-bye.